Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Marco Portals How Tuesday webinar series, which is dedicated to showing how to use the portals data and tools to help with your work. I'm Carl Villacova of the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal team and Monmouth University's Urban Coast Institute, which is located on the Jersey Shore. Today, I'm grateful to be joined by four presenters from the Coast Guard: John Stone of the Office of Navigation at Coast Guard Headquarters in Washington, D.C., Captain Maureen Kallgren of District 5 in Portsmouth, Virginia, Lieutenant Commander Michael Wysong of District 1 in Boston, and Lieutenant Commander Ian Hanna of the Coast Guard Navigation Center in Virginia. We'll also be joined by Emily Shumchinia, Manager of the Northeast Ocean Data Portal. This morning's webinar will provide updates on a series of Coast Guard Port Access Route Studies, or PARs, focused on major ports along the Atlantic coast. In addition, you'll see some demos of publicly available mapping tools that you can use to view and analyze the proposals being made through the PARs reports. But before we get started, I'd like to go over a few points on the tech side. First, to note that this webinar is being recorded for the benefit of those who couldn't make it and will be posted on the portals. There we go. And will be posted on the portal's webinars and blog pages within the next probably 24 to 48 hours. This webinar is being conducted by Zoom, which I'm sure many of you are more familiar with at this point than you'd like. By default, everybody's on mute, but when it comes time to the Q&A session, you'll be able to unmute yourselves and turn on your cameras to share your questions and comments. Please click the button to raise your hand at that point, as shown on the screen, and I'll call on people to speak in order. You're also welcome to type in a question in the chat at any time. Our presenters may answer it in writing during the session if they have time. Otherwise, I can read it aloud during the Q&A and we'll take it verbally. So we've got an hour and plenty of ground to cover. And with that, I'll stop there and turn over the floor to our first presenter, John Stone.
Hi, good morning. I appreciate that introduction. And if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide quickly, thank you. Well, this was another title slide. So as Carl said, my name is John Stone. I'm with the Office of Navigation at Coast Guard Headquarters. I'm a marine transportation specialist within the office. We thought, as we got into presenting here this discussion on the port access route studies, we felt that it would be a good idea to first start with an overview of what a PARS study, what a PARS is, what goes into it, why do we do them, and more importantly, what do we get out of them. So while Captain Kallgren and Lieutenant Commander Wysong will cover the kind of the meat of the studies, quite frankly, the more exciting stuff, I get to cover the exciting stuff on policy and government regulation. So if we'll go ahead and advance to that first slide, I'll get started and get it out of the way. So the big question is, why do we do a PARS? The bottom line is we do a port access route study because it's the law. If you go back to 1978, the Ports and Waterway Safety Act was amended to give the Coast Guard the authority to establish traffic separation schemes and safety fairways. And in fact, the statute at the time says, or the statute currently says, in order to provide safe access routes for the movement of vessel traffics, the Coast Guard, or we shall, designate necessary fairways and traffic separation schemes in order to do so. But before we go ahead and cordon off those portions of the waterways for TSSs and for safety fairways, there's a couple of things that we are also required to do. First and foremost, the law says that we cannot deprive, any granted lease or permit. So in determining the designation of the traffic separation scheme or the fairway, we can't, take away the right that's already granted by a previous lease or under any other provision of the law. And also, before we go ahead and we designate the fairway or the traffic separation scheme or any of these routing measures, we need to reconcile any safe access routes with other reasonable uses. We have to take consideration of other reasonable uses to the extent practicable of the water before moving forward. And then finally, really where this whole the port access route study comes in is that we must conduct a study of traffic density and the needs. So let's go ahead and advance the slide, please. So in conducting that study and advancing the needs, the law further describes what needs to go in a port access route study. And there are 9 items. I'm not going to go ahead, I'm not going to read all 9 items, but you can see that, given the extent of what needs to go into the port access route study, this is the reason why these studies are so large. They take so much time to complete. There's a lot of important information that the Coast Guard needs to consider before we, again, cordon off this section of the water and make it, recognize the fundamental right to navigation over all other uses of the waterway. So, and then ultimately also, we do need to consult with maritime stakeholders. We can't do this in a vacuum. We need to talk to all the stakeholders. We need to talk to all the other waterway users to ensure that we have all the information in order to make the proper decision moving forward. Next slide, please. And finally, what does the PARS tell us? Well, so these port access route studies are typically conducted by our district offices, and they are done at the district level because they have the expertise of the waterway. It's the operational commander of the area that we'd be looking off to provide that safe access route. From the district commander down to the sector commander, those are the commands in the Coast Guard that have those relationships with those maritime stakeholders that we need to consult with. And so those, the study, therefore, then will provide recommendations up to Coast Guard headquarters, and then we'll move forward from there, given the recommendations, any regulatory or international work that we would need to do in order to properly designate a fairway or a traffic separation scheme. Now, the PARS itself could actually recommend nothing. We could do the whole study and we could say that, everything's fine in the waterway. We're going to maintain status quo the way it is. But it could also recommend a couple other items. It could recommend a specific routing measure that has an international requirement, like a traffic separation scheme, a precautionary area, or an area to be avoided, just a couple of examples here. And if that's the case, we also need to, in addition to any domestic regulatory work that we would need to do, we'd also have to go present at the international level at the IMO for adoption internationally. Outside of those types of routing measures, a safety fairway, that's just strict domestic regulatory work that we would go through, as well as any kind of regulated nav area, a safety zone, or any kind of anchorage ground, special anchorage, or fairway anchorage that we would need to, we would deem that we would need to actually designate in this particular case. Last slide from me. Next one, please. And these are just a couple of examples of recent PARs that we've done or we have currently ongoing. The largest one that we've done most recently was the Atlantic Coast PARs. I said most of PARs are done at the district level. The Atlantic Coast PARs was actually done at in conjunction with Atlantic area as well as headquarters, because it covered such a large area and it also crossed over multiple districts. So after the Atlantic Coast PARs, as we started to move forward with the fairway designation, you can see that's the picture on the right of your screen there. Came out of the AC PARs as we move forward with the advanced notice of proposed rulemaking of proposed fairways along the Atlantic coast. But we noticed that, the AC PARs covered that north-south route, but it didn't really cover those east-west movements into the ports. So we needed to do some supplemental PARs in order to account for the rest of the remaining of the waterway. As well as, as things progressed, we had some conflicts that we needed to really reconcile as best we could. So we had these 4 supplemental PARs that are currently ongoing that, Commander Wysong and Captain Kallgren will get into. And you can see I've got the block areas, on that slide as well. Blocked out might be difficult to see on the slide, but blocked out of where the study areas are for. But outside of the Atlantic coast, we have done PARs in other regions of the country, Bering Strait, Nantucket, most recently the Massachusetts, Rhode Island PARs. huge one out west with the Straits of Juan de Fuca a few years back. And then not mentioned on this slide, you may have read in the Federal Register that we've kicked off a Pacific Coast PARS most recently to do something very similar that we've done on the Atlantic coast. To study those waters in anticipation of any additional waterway use in that area, as well as some up in the Alaskan area as well. We've got some PARs ongoing. So again, my goal was to actually provide you with a quick overview of the PARs, of what a PARS is, what the PARS process is, and what goes in and what we get out of them. And so at this point, I'm going to shift to Captain Kallgren, and she's going to present on the ongoing supplemental PARS efforts in the 5th Coast Guard District, the Mid-Atlantic region. Captain?
Thanks, John. As John said, I'm Captain Maureen Kallgren. I'm a reserve officer who was brought on active duty with the Coast Guard 5th District in Portsmouth, Virginia, to help conduct these supplemental PARs. There are 3 being done currently in the 5th District, and the Seacoast of New Jersey Port Access Route Study is the one that we'll be talking about today. Next slide, please. So, germane to today's webinar is the coordination between the 5th Coast Guard District and the 1st Coast Guard District, which is in Boston. As John had pointed out, there was a system of Atlantic coast fairways, excuse me, and the supplemental PARs are looking at connector fairways from those offshore routes to the major ports along the East Coast, including the Chesapeake Bay, the Delaware River, and the Port of New York and New Jersey. Next slide. So the Seacoast of New Jersey, including the approaches to the Delaware Bay, is the northernmost port access route study in the 5th Coast Guard District. And that boundary line at the top of the screen in the chart is the 5th and 1st Coast Guard District boundary. So you'll see there's some overlap in the approaches to New York and New Jersey. You'll see on this slide the timeline for the port access route study. I am happy to say that Admiral Dickey, our district commander, has signed the notice of availability for the draft report, and it should be published in the Federal Register, hopefully within the next week or so. It will be open for 30 days for comment on regulations.gov, and we'll be sure to get that link and all the information to Marco for posting on the data portal as soon as it's released. Next slide. So here you'll see some of the proposed actions that the 5th Coast Guard District is recommending to Coast Guard headquarters to be included in the Shipping Safety Fairways Notice of Proposed Rulemaking as it moves forward. We would propose an extension of the traffic separation schemes to avoid and extend beyond any of the current offshore wind lease areas. We are recommending precautionary areas at the terminus of those TSSs where fairways overlap and converge to create an awareness to the mariner that there's a great mixing of traffic in those areas. We propose an adjustment of the Chesapeake Bay to Delaware Bay fairway, which is along the Delaware and Maryland coast to the south of that chart graphic. We'll move that. We propose to move it closer to shore and create a connector fairway that bisects the TSSs at the mouth of the bay for near shore traffic such as tug and tows. We would also propose, and this is where we worked very closely with the 1st Coast Guard District, a near shore connector fairway between New Jersey and New York to allow for current coastal traffic that transits the coast of New Jersey between the southern ports and the Port of New York. So that fairway is the one closest to the shore at the north portion of the chart along the New Jersey coast. That concludes the presentation I have for the updates to the Port Access Route Study for the Seacoast of New Jersey, and I will turn it over to Commander Weissong, my partner in crime at the 1st Coast Guard District, to present on the Northern New York Bight PARs.
Thanks, Captain. Good morning, everybody. This is Lieutenant Commander Mike Weissong from the 1st Coast Guard District Waterways Branch. Thanks to Mr. Stone and Captain Kallgren for an excellent introduction. Carl, if we could go to the next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to start out with discussing a bit of the study area. As Captain Kallgren mentioned, that southwestern boundary, if you will, designates the boundary line between the area of responsibilities that the 1st Coast Guard District and the 5th Coast Guard District are responsible for. As also mentioned by Captain Kallgren, the Coast Guard has collaborated considerably across the districts in support of, the mariners look at this region just as the New York Bight and/or the Atlantic Ocean. We recognize that, and thus we're working, very closely. Just want to let everybody know kind of where we are in the process. It's already been mentioned, but I'm a fan of repetition. The 1st District and the 5th District have been tasked to do this supplemental PARS, supplemental to the Atlantic Coast PARS. And so we go off and we do a study, and that study is just that. It's not rulemaking. It's a analysis that makes recommendations to Coast Guard headquarters for further disposition. Many of the routing measures, such as shipping safety fairways and others, that authority rests with Coast Guard headquarters. So the districts are tasked to present their regional view of what is recommended, and Coast Guard headquarters is the final authority. So PARS is a public process, and I just wanted to make sure everybody's well aware of where we are within this process. The New York Bight PARS has been published as of the 15th of July in a draft form. So number 1, it's a recommendation. Number 2, it's a draft. And then the district will go off and finalize that. To give some history as to what's transpired thus far, the notice of study was kicked off and announced on the 29th of June, 2020, with a 60-day comment period. A fairly robust response for that comment period, 25 comment submissions with some substantial supporting data. 2 public meetings were conducted to talk about the notice of study, and this was kind of like height of the pandemic. So 30th of July, 2020 and August 11th, those were conducted virtually. The Coast Guard had received quite a bit of good info, but there were some things that we felt would be good to ask the public, such as many of the comments that were received in the initial notice of study were requesting fairways of varying widths, 4 nautical miles, 5 nautical miles, 9 nautical miles. So the supplemental, amongst a few different topics, came and asked, can you provide additional information as to why that width is necessary? There was also some examples such as extending the traffic separation schemes out to the outer continental edge of the outer continental shelf. And that was another question in the supplemental. Can we request that the public provide additional information as to why that's necessary? These types of questions. That was a 30-day comment period, received some good responses there. Between mid-May and mid-July, we finalized our draft report and then subsequently issued that in the Federal Register with a 45-day comment period, which closed on the 30th of August. In concert with that, we conducted a virtual public meeting on the 30th of July, which the presentation and the recording are available in the Federal Register, the public docket. And then in supplement to that, we conducted 3 in-person meetings in Narragansett, Rhode Island on the 10th of August, Montauk, New York on the 24th of August, and then in Stonington, Connecticut on the 25th of August. Like I said, the comment period closed on the 30th of August, but one of the requests during that the Montauk public meeting specifically was to extend that comment period. We were unable to do that, but we were able to reopen the comment period on the 9th of September. So here we are, the comment period is back open. So I'll present the findings of the 1st District's Port Access Route Study in the next slide momentarily. And I just wanted to reiterate that the comment period is open. So if you're either seeing it for the first time or have other info that you would like the 1st District to consider, please do so via the Federal Register. Lastly, the final PARS report from the New York Bight study area is anticipated to be released by the 1st Coast Guard District in the fall of 2021, once the comment period closes and we've assessed any additional information that the public can provide. Next slide, please, Carl. Okay. Sorry, bear with me one second. Okay, I just want to do like a little bit of familiarization first. So if you were to look at NOAA's 12300 raster chart today, you would see a precautionary area, which is the large pink circle that's at the entrance to the Port of New York and New Jersey. You would see each of the traffic separation schemes, which there's an eastern, a southeastern, and a southern traffic separation scheme. As we've been discussing this boundary line, that's represented in yellow. You won't see that on the chart, but that's effectively just something to keep in mind. Anything south of that is the 5th District's area of responsibility. Anything north of that, at least in the study area, is the 1st District's. So we've got a precautionary area, 3 traffic separation schemes. Then additionally, there is a Nantucket to Ambrose and an Ambrose to Nantucket shipping safety fairway system. Those are indicated in the kind of like the bright red off of the eastern fairway. And then in like June of 2020, Coast Guard headquarters had provided an advance notice of proposed rulemaking, which is official rulemaking. It's the first step in official rulemaking, certainly not final, to propose the Cape Charles to Montauk fairway, which is depicted here in a brownish color that cuts across the bight, and then also a Long Island fairway, which correspondingly runs to the south shore of Long Island. So those are what's existing. What is proposed by Coast Guard headquarters as of June 2020, when the New York Bight Pars kicked off. The district office, supported by the subordinate sectors, 5th District, Atlantic area, Coast Guard headquarters, and a number of other waterways stakeholders and subject matter experts. We assessed this waterway utilizing some of the things that John mentioned, and we basically found that the existing traffic separation schemes, precautionary area, were effective and have been in place, since the mid-1960s, and should, that's one objective of the PARs, is to validate the existing routing measures are still appropriate, which the district has. And then in addition to that, the 1st District found that they supported the Cape Charles to Montauk fairway as proposed in the advance notice of proposed rulemaking by Coast Guard headquarters. But we came to the conclusion that because it crosses the PARs boundary areas, and there's mariners like the consistent and long fairways, so there's a lot of like give and take whether this fairway, because you'll note there's location conflict with some of the BOEM's proposed wind energy areas. If that were to shift a bit to accommodate mixed use of the waterway to include offshore wind development and or other resource development, that was best discussion by Coast Guard headquarters, but it was a finding of the New York Bight Pars that a cut across the bight was appropriate. In addition to that, the district, 1st District, had conducted a notice of inquiry on a traditional anchorage, commonly referred to by mariners as the Ambrose Anchorage. You'll see that in a kind of a darker pinkish color just to the right or east of the precautionary area. And it was a finding of the port access route study that, at least in the draft, that anchorage, the district is proposing to federalize or formalize that anchorage, commonly used by deep draft traffic, as was pictured, an example of which was pictured on the cover slide for this webinar. To do so, that would also conflict with the Long Island Fairway, which is the lime green colored fairway to the south shore of Long Island. Difficult to see in this graphic, but the fairway is sort of a panhandle geometry where it extends to the north of that anchorage. So the traffic separation scheme is to the south, then the anchorage, then the fairway to the north, which in our traffic analysis was found to represent current day operations. As Captain Kallgren mentioned, we concur and recommend to establish a New Jersey to New York connector fairway along the coast of New Jersey. And then additionally, we had a finding that we recommended a Hudson Canyon to Ambrose southeastern fairway, which follows the geometry of the traffic separation scheme and extends to a point 5 nautical miles beyond BOEM's March 29, 2021 wind energy areas depicted in blue in this graphic, to both the north and to the southwest. Additionally, it's recommended that a Hudson Canyon to Ambrose eastern fairway, which extends to the east and joins to the southeastern traffic separation scheme, be implemented to a point 5 nautical miles beyond that central bight wind energy area. And then lastly, it's a recommendation of the Northern New York Bight Pars to establish a single Nantucket to Ambrose fairway. Again, just for clarification, there currently exists today, there is a Nantucket to Ambrose and an Ambrose to Nantucket fairway, which maybe in the context of the wind energy area that's depicted by the name of Fairway South, runs to the north and to the south of those fairways. The 1st District is recommending a large fairway, which follows a similar geometry to the south extension of the southeastern traffic separation scheme in the form of a fairway, and the southern traffic separation scheme in the form of a fairway to the east to adjoin to the traffic separation scheme off the coast of the Massachusetts Islands. Of note that shipping safety fairway is in location conflicts currently with the Fairway's South wind energy area. So for clarity, it's a finding of this PARS that the district recommends to Coast Guard headquarters to preserve navigation in that space, noting that location conflict with the subject wind energy area. That concludes my presentation, and I can pass it off to the next presenter.
Thank you very much, Mike. And now we'll move on to part 2 of our webinar, which will show how to find and use data related to the PARS on a new Coast Guard GIS web app, the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal, and the Northeast Ocean Data Portal. In a moment, I'll drop links to all 3 sites in the chat so that you can explore them yourselves. But before we jump in, I'll attempt to preemptively answer a question that might be on people's minds as they watch this. And that is, if the data is on all 3 sites, which one should I use? And here's one way of looking at it. The Coast Guard should really be viewed as the authoritative source for the data. So if you're looking to download a map layer to use on your own GIS software and want to be sure that what you have is, the official version, the Coast Guard site is the place to go. If you want the ability to overlay the Coast Guard data with map layers showing shipping traffic, offshore wind areas, marine life habitats, etc., then the portals are probably the place to go. The Coast Guard site is dedicated to Coast Guard data, as Ian will show in a few minutes. And, the portals have thousands of map layers covering all things going on at sea. As for the portals, the PARS data is the same on both. So if you happen to be more accustomed to using the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal, go with whichever one that you're most comfortable with. Emily and I will show you where to find the data on both sites, since the terminology and organization on the portals is a little bit different, not too much. So with that, we'll first give the floor to Lieutenant Commander Hannah to show us the new Coast Guard tools. And he has some slides to kick this off.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lieutenant Commander Ian Hanna from the Navigation Center, also known as NAVCEN. And we assist the PARS process through conducting data analysis for the PARS studies, mostly dealing with AIS data. But we are also stepping into a role as a coordination point for PARS-related data, which is why I'm speaking to you today. So first, I'd like to introduce the Navigation Center website, which, by the way, shows up as if you type in Coast Guard in Google, Navigation Center is the first website that pops up. It's a .gov versus .mil, so there's a lot of good maritime safety related information and the different locations on the NAVCEN website. But specifically for our subject today, we have a page dedicated to port access route studies, which has old PARS reports that you can go in and look at, as well as announcements that for ongoing PARS studies. So the public meetings, for instance, that were mentioned earlier were posted and announced on that PARS page. We're continuing to build that out and hope to have more detail on those pages soon. Right now, what you'll see is a link to an Esri Web app that has all of the details on the PARS proposals that you saw earlier. If you can go to the next slide. So if you follow the link, this is the page that you will see. It's the same as Carl mentioned. It's the same exact data that is posted on Marco right now. We did some quality assurance and made sure everything matches across district lines. And this is kind of our first attempt at building a data sharing platform with more authoritative Coast Guard layers. So check back, hopefully we'll be able to build this out and have other Coast Guard layers for you to use. And as Carl mentioned, that you can download these layers for your own use, and I'll just show you that real quick. If you go to the next slide, the widget there on the right is the select and download option. The first thing you need to do is draw an area that you want to download data from. That's that first that top red box. You just choose the way you want to draw the area you're looking for, and then you press report. Go to the next slide. And this shows you everything in the area which you selected. And then finally, that's that last arrow with the box is the download option, and that'll give you a shape file that you can export and put into your own projects. Again, we're looking to build this out. So if you have, apologize for that. If you have feedback for us, you can also provide that on the NavSend website. And that is all I have for now. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks for that. And as I mentioned, I'll put a link to this and the two portals in the chat in just a few moments. But for now, I'm going to switch gears and share the web so I can demonstrate the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal. And just give me 1 second here. Ah, finally. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Very good. For some reason, Zoom was choosing to not show my internet, but here we go. This is the homepage for the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal at portal.midatlanticocean.org. And what you see here is the splash page. Up top, you've got this rotation that shows some of the latest data and tools announcements that we have. So to get to the mapping application, which we call Marine Planner, you could either click down here, View Maps, or just right here on the navigation, click Map. We jump right in. As you see, by default, we use the ocean-based map, but you do have a few options in the bottom right. And on the left here, you see about a dozen different categories or themes, as we call them, for data on the portal, including maritime. Click that, you'll get a large drop down. And the first stuff you'll see at the top of this list is about a decade worth of AIS vessel transit traffic data, essentially for ships. And scrolling down, see a lot more aids to navigation, anchorage areas, pilot boarding stations, lots of stuff relevant to this conversation for sure, port facilities. But right here, you'll see a drop down, U.S. Coast Guard proposed areas and studies. When you click that, you'll find all of the layers that Ian had mentioned on the Coast Guard site, including right at the top, we'll start with port access route study areas. And you can see where they're all delineated from north to south. And now we want to add on the Chesapeake Bay PARs. We'll put on the New Jersey Seacoast, which will now connect, the Northern New York Bight. And we'll also throw on the Atlantic Coast AC PARs and show how those line up. And I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see closer here into the New Jersey coast area. Once you have all of that live, you can see on the, well, there's a legend tab right there, which can help decode what you're seeing, and the active tab. And since these are layers, the one on top is going to be the one that's kind of the most dominant showing, which happens to be the AC PARs. But you can change how that looks by clicking this adjust opacity button. and using the toolbar to slide it up and down. And you could also drop it to the bottom if you prefer. I'll also point out that outside of that drop down, the routing measures is probably a pretty important layer to see in combination with these. This shows the existing routing measures. Some of you may be just more used to seeing the federal nautical chart, which is another option to do it. But some may also prefer to just use the ocean base map or something like that, which is a little bit cleaner and has less details, so it's just easier to see. So once you have all of that connected, you can turn this on in combination with any of the other data that we have here on the portal. So in this neck of the woods here, certainly for the renewable energy theme that we have down here below, you can turn on the lease areas, and you can turn on the Boehm New York Bight proposed wind energy areas as well, which comes in combination with the proposed transit corridors. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see how that all looks. And then finally, we can overlay that with an AIS layer just to show how, a sample of how, for example, cargo vessel transit counts show in combination with this. And as I showed before, you can manipulate this a bit. And put that on a bit lighter and drop it to the bottom. Whatever helps you visualize all of this. I should also point out one modification that we make on the portal per requests of users is to make these proposed areas clickable. And when you do, you get this pop-up that shows a little about what you're seeing. So for example, I'll click here on the Northern New York Bight PARs. So you have some information that identifies that and has a direct link to the Federal Register notice, which can be helpful, especially for people who are interested in finding out more about these and making a comment and so forth. And one thing I'll point out relevant to what Captain Kallgren said was with New Jersey, that PARS has not been, or the study report hasn't been published yet. So that is one that wouldn't have a Federal Register notice attached to it. But as soon as that does go live, which we expect to do in the coming days, we will update this so that people have that easy link to help get back and forth to it. Beyond that, in the active tab, you can click this green eye icon. And when you do that, initially you'll get a short description to any of this data. You can click read more to get the full data catalog version, data downloads, metadata, a link to the source who provided it, and other information. So with that, it's 10:38, and I do want to be conscious of time and pass it over to Emily, who can show how to do the same on the Northeast Ocean Data Portal. Can you share your screen okay?
How's that?
Very good.
Excellent. Thanks, Carl. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Shamshinia. I manage the Northeast Ocean Data Portal in collaboration with some other folks on the phone here today, including Nick Napoli. I'm showing you the Northeast Ocean Data Portal homepage. It's at northeastoceandata.org. For most of the things I'm going to show you today, we're going to use the Data Explorer tool, which you can access just by clicking this giant tile here. It's one of the most versatile tools on the portal where you can overlay any of the different data sets we have in any of the categories that you see here on the left with each other on the same map. So you're most freedom of selection and options for display in this Data Explorer tool. So you'll notice that the map I'm starting with has offshore renewable energy lease areas showing on it already. Where I was able to get that data is in this energy and infrastructure category. So you just click on a title and it will open the different subcategories and selections of layers underneath. So I just ticked on the active renewable energy leases and planning areas further down to show the proposed lease areas in the New York Bight. And from there, I can start overlaying additional layers. So if I open the marine transportation category, you'll see that there's 3 subcategories here. Navigation, which is showing us layers related to current operational and navigational areas. I'll go back there in a second. Commercial traffic shows the many different years and vessel types of AIS data sets that Carl just showed as well in the Mid-Atlantic portal. And our proposed areas and studies, which I'll absolutely come back to in just a second. So if I expand navigation, I can kind of tick on some of these layers that previous presenters showed and talked about. Some of the titles of the layers use more layperson terms in some cases, but many of them are here. So you see precautionary area and anchorages areas, which are things some of the Coast Guard folks discussed. I'm also going to turn on pilot boarding areas and pilot boarding stations. And so we can start to populate this map with some of the current navigational and operationals areas data to help understand our landscape here. One of the things in this category that's perhaps most relevant to this northern part of the study area that I'm showing in the Northeast portal is this right whale dynamic management areas layer. This is a layer that comes from NOAA fisheries. It is delineated on an almost daily basis where there are right whales sighted in the Northeast. So this layer, when you tick it on, will represent the most active dynamic management area that's open right now with NOAA fisheries. And these are voluntary slow zones for vessels. So these will shift throughout the year and from day to day sometimes when right whales are active in this Northeast region and part of the landscape that mariners are aware of. So I'm going to collapse the navigation category just so that I can move down to proposed areas and studies. And you can see all of the same PARS layers and other proposed studies layers that Carl and others have discussed. I can tick on the Northern New York Bight PARS, and this is the exact same layer that Carl showed in the Mid-Atlantic portal. And that is available on the Coast Guard tools as well. So same kind of deal for the Northeast portal. You can click on any feature and a window will pop open that sends you right to the Federal Register for more information. And similarly, you can always click this pop out button to access that information and further detail on the layers that you're looking at. One of the things I think is most interesting about these maps is sort of how space fills up when we think about just these few interests and how everything is planned to fit neatly within this space. And so recognizing that offshore wind is in this particular area that I'm showing a rapidly growing and rapidly changing feature, set of features, I just wanted to point out on the Northeast portal, we have a page in our current issues menu up at the top here that I'm showing called Offshore Wind Projects. And if we open that page, there's a catalog or a table that lists for every lease area, if there has been a project or a set of projects proposed in that lease area, you can find links to maps and information about each of those. So in the first column, you'll find a link to the project name that sends you off to BOEM's site about that project. You can click on the lease number to view a map of just that lease area. There's information about the parent company, who owns the project or owns the lease, the status of the project, if it's in operation already, or what regulatory review phase it's in, and then finally a map of the project itself and any detailed data like turbine locations, proposed turbine locations, and proposed cable routes. So just a handy feature in the Northeast portal that helps keep track of all this stuff going on in this very busy southern New England and upper Mid-Atlantic Bight area that we're looking at here. And so with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Carl.
Great, thank you for that. And let me share my screen again. Back to the slides for a moment, but we can queue up any of the portals or the Coast Guard site upon request. So let me run through the comments and questions that have come through in the chat so far. First one from Edward LeBlanc. Great presentations, thank you. There was a mention of a, quote, fundamental right of navigation, unquote, but it is important to distinguish that the paramount right of navigation, as specified in statute, pertains only to designated port access routes. And Lieutenant Commander Wysong makes a great point. PARS only makes recommendations, not proposals. Would anyone on our panel care to weigh in, or?
Sure. This is John. First and foremost, thank you for your comment, Ed. Correct. I use the term fundamental over paramount, as the statute actually writes. But the point I was trying to make is that if after the process, if it is necessary, if after the process, which includes the PARS, and we necessarily have to go through a subsequent rulemaking project, and we do designate the waterways as a TSS or a fairway, that area designated is what would recognize that right of navigation over all other uses. But we've got to go through this process to determine, as we are required to provide a safe access route, we have to go through the process to determine what's the right location to put this and to designate the waters, taking into consideration all of the other users of the waterway in the same area. Well, thanks for your comment, for keeping me honest.
Okay, and it occurs to me I need to adjust the security settings so that people can speak if they'd like to. You can always just raise your hand in the participants queue, and we can take your questions like that as well. So also in the chat, we have from Larry Wise, the New York Bight PARS draft discusses a 2 to 3 nautical mile buffer around the fairways. Are the green fairway extensions shown inclusive of that buffer, or would that buffer cut into the proposed New York Bight lease areas?
Thank you, Mr. Wise. This is Lieutenant Commander Mike Wysong. It's a great question and a good topic. Shipping safety fairways, by their definition, ensure structure is not built within the designated space. They're not traffic separation schemes. And the reason I bring that up is because there's specific collision regulations, commonly known as rules of the road, that apply in the traffic separation schemes. Shipping safety fairways are not compulsory. They basically are optional. And they basically just preserve navigation. That's effectively what a shipping safety fairway does. I think with reference, one point of clarification on the draft New York Bight PARS comments on the marine planning guidelines applicability to traffic separation schemes. And there, you can read the marine planning guideline in a number of locations. It's promulgated as a Commandant Instruction 16,003.2b. There is also a NAVIC, Navigation Vessel Inspection Circular, which includes the marine planning guidelines, and additionally the Atlantic Coast PARS makes reference to the marine planning guidelines. Those marine planning guidelines, like I said, are applicable to traffic separation schemes, but are not specifically applicable to fairways. So to answer your question, after that kind of detailed explanation, there is no setback or buffer associated with the shipping safety fairway. And wherever those fairways are being recommended, effectively the Coast Guard is recommending preserving those for navigation and not having a fixed structure located within those designated spaces. If that doesn't answer your question, I can try again, sir.
Thank you for the clarification. Who else has a question for anyone that you've heard from here this morning so far?
Hello, sorry, I can't figure out how to put my hand up. This is
Sure, go ahead.
Sean Klein. Thank you. This is Sean Klein with the Chamber of Shipping of America. I was wondering if anybody could speak more to the 2-mile buffer zone. And the reason I ask that is because through many of the different forums that are out there over the years, we had seemed to kind of at least loosely agree on a 2-mile nautical mile buffer zone. And recently, many of my colleagues and I have heard that 1 nautical mile is sufficient in various Coast Guard presentations and by others in the industry. So I'd love to hear some comments from Coast Guard or anybody on the, if 2 nautical miles is acceptable or where we are with that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Sean. I'll do my best to try to clarify. So the 2-mile buffer zone, it appears in a guideline that we have, a marine planning guideline, which, as Commander Weisland has said, is available via our, mostly to the public via our navigation vessel inspection circular 0119. We basically, as we developed that guideline, that was based on best practices that we saw really internationally as we were going through that process, and when we developed it. It's something we would certainly like to see as the guideline, but in some cases we will notice that a 1 nautical mile is sufficient. And if you'll actually start to look more internationally as well, we were seeing some more of that, recommendations really on the international community when it depends on the particular type of structure being put outside the traffic separation scheme or any of the routing measure in general. When we look at it from a fairway perspective, we have a legal ability to actually go as far out as we can to ensure that nothing is built on the inside. So that buffer zone, as discussed, again, it's a guideline. It's something we would like to see. But again, as we go through this process, it is a balance between all the waterway users that we're trying to make forth, to make sure that we have the best means for the mariner to safely navigate and access ports, as well as still provide any other waterway users their right to use of the waterway as well, and to live to any other, or to use any means that the lease allows for.
Thank you for that answer. And to just a follow up to, absolutely, we need to be reasonable. I think the only concern is once that buffer zone is determined, and let's say an incident does happen where a ship hits a turbine in the water. I like to use the analogy of a light post next to a street. If a car hits that light post, it's the car's fault. It's not because maybe the light post was in the middle of the sidewalk. So, I think it's a discussion that needs to continue, and those recommendations need to be thought of very considerably. I know our members have concern of that, and making sure that there's just enough leeway in case the unimaginable does happen, and the ship's doing everything that they can. The last thing we want to do is injure people or cause an environmental event. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and we agree 100%. That's why it's the process. We got to keep the communication going in designating the waterways, and we just got to make sure that again, we strike that balance as best we can. And safety, by all means, is always paramount. Thank you.
Anyone else on the panel like to respond on that, or shall we move to the next question? Okay, Jeremy Firestone, can you unmute?
Yes, thank you. Jeremy Firestone, University of Delaware. Further on the buffer zones, can you explain how the buffer zones relate to the limitations in the United Nations Law of the Sea Treaty, specifically Article 65, which limits safety zones to 500 meters?
So Article 65 of UNCLOS is referring to just that, a safety zone, and that allows, that's an agreement of the treaty that allows up to 500 meters for the host nations to actually designate a safety zone in those particular waters. So they are certainly related, but a safety zone and the recommended guidelines that we have in our maritime guidance are really not the same, apples and oranges.
But wouldn't establishing a buffer zone of how would establishing a buffer zone of a nautical mile be consistent with a limitation in the Law of the Sea Treaty of up to 500 meters?
Yeah, I think the confusion is that safety zones are meant to restrict access, and the fairways that we are putting up are meant to enable access, right? And freedom of navigation. So two different tools.
Anything further to add on that one? Okay, we have another question in the chat. Should you be considering, and this is from William Broadley, should you be considering a TSS for the area south of the Barnegat Sea Lane, considering that there will be wind areas on both sides?
This is Captain Kallgren. I believe that Captain Broadley is referring to the Barnegat to New York TSS and the southern area, which resides in the District 5 AOR. There is a fairway that's been established or proposed to preserve access to that TSS. And as the first Coast Guard district sort of owns the Port of New York and New Jersey, and all of those stakeholders lie within their AOR, the 5th district did not consider changing that fairway into any other routing measure, because it's really the first Coast Guard district's AOR in that the traffic going into and out of New York and New Jersey. So I'm going to ask Commander Wysong if he would like to comment further on the consideration for a TSS over a fairway in the approach.
Thank you, Captain. Yes, I would like to comment on that. So as discussed in the presentation, in the first district AOR are the eastern and southeastern traffic separation schemes, and extending off of that, the first district is recommending shipping safety fairways, which effectively follow the geometry of those traffic separation schemes. And as I mentioned a minute ago, there are specific rules of the road associated with traffic separation schemes that do not apply to fairways, which, fairways are optional in nature. So it is the first district's finding that a shipping safety fairway sufficiently preserves navigation without, kind of overburdening, so to speak, the space that the fairway occupies. There's additional implications for the many users of the waterway, to specifically including the fishing community, which is not prohibited to fish in fairways, but would have some prohibition to do so within a traffic separation scheme. They would at least be bound by certain rules of the road. So the first district's finding is that the shipping safety fairway that are being recommended, that are extending off those traffic separation schemes, are sufficient to preserve navigation. But with that said, as I previously mentioned, the comment period is open, and we would absolutely recommend any and all inputs. It's called a comment, but really a comment submission that provides position, justification for that position, how it benefits the American public and specifically the regional waterway, and represents an economic interest. Those are the best comments that could really help us. So we'd be very grateful, sir, if you would present a case for why you think a traffic separation scheme may be more appropriate than a shipping safety fairway. Thank you, sir, for the question.
Are there any further questions? I see none in the chat, but if anyone would like to type something in or raise their hand, feel free now. In the meantime, we'll wait a minute longer. I would just mention that for those who are interested in learning more about how to use the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal, and I'm sure Emily would echo this for the Northeast, feel free to reach out to us at any time. And we can set up trainings for you and your staff virtually in better times, even in person. But I'm going to put in the chat a link to sort of a 101 level webinar that I did over the summer, and we do on occasion for training people of just all of the basics of the portal. But again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions about it or would like to learn more. Any final questions? Any final thoughts from anyone on our panel?
Carl, thank
Yeah,
you for the
Carl, thank
opportunity
you.
for.
Oh, there
Yeah,
you go.
thanks,
Mike's
John.
jumping in first.
Yeah, I apologize, sir. I get in line with Coast Guard
No, go
headquarters
ahead,
first
go
is
ahead.
the right thing to do. But just wanted to say thank you. In addition to this being informative and hopefully useful for the public, it's also a form of outreach, and we're very grateful. And again, one last plug: we seek all commentary provided to the docket that's open at present. Thank you so much.
It is my pleasure, and really appreciate you coming on here and walking through all of this. And as I said, we will have a recording of this webinar on the portal in short order, probably within the next 24 hours. You can check the portal blog or its webinars page for that. Also, if you are a follower of the portal on Twitter, that's a good first place to get information like that as well. So barring any final questions or thoughts?
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Carl and Emily, for your help. Thanks to all the team on the Coast Guard side for a great presentation. I hope it was informative, and we appreciate the public's interest.
And I just want to echo everything that Captain and Commander said, and also appreciate the comments and the questions from the public. The best way we can move forward is to make sure we have these discussions open, we get all the information out there, so ultimately at the end, the right decision can be made. So thanks again for everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to participate.
Great. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next time.